Hi, I'm Mark Cullen with a do-it-yourself video library explaining how to build a rain garden. This is one in a series of videos produced by Landscape Ontario and Park Lane Landscapes. A native plant is one that occurs naturally in a particular region without human intervention. Native plants are vital to creating a natural, sustainable landscape. Using them, wherever we can, is important because they provide the most appropriate food and habitat for native pollinators, insects, and wildlife. They're best suited to tolerate the local weather and rainfall patterns, which means less need for watering, fertilizing, and pest control.
You get to use some really interesting plants. Things like marsh milkweed, tall, pink, beautiful, late summer blooming, and it benefits the monarchs as well because they need milkweed to feed on. Having things like blue flag iris and sneezeweed, which doesn't cause allergies, it just blooms with ragweed. Having plants like that in the garden is beautiful, and it adds long seasonal interest. You know, the garden doesn't just bloom in the spring, it blooms all season long. There are some beautiful sedge grasses and a plant called winterberry, our native deciduous holly, which adds year-round interest to the garden. So as a designer, and I suppose as an artist, rain gardens excite me as well. They can add texture to the garden because you can plant things that are fairly bold, like the poorly named skunk cabbage, beautiful plant, and really nice bold leaves. You can even have edibles in the rain garden, things like marsh marigold, which you can cook and eat like spinach. Some really unusual things. Some of the viburnums do great.
We join Karen Abrahams, proprietor of Native Plants in Claremont, Ontario, as she describes some of the many plants that are ideally suited to rain gardens.
A great plant for a residential shady garden is wild ginger. It's a ground cover. A neat thing about wild ginger is it has the flower a purple flower that comes out in the spring and grows underneath the big leaves. And so it just sits right on the soil. It's pollinated by ants. And it will just eventually spread and produce these lovely big leaves that stay nice and green all season long. Maidenhair Fern is a pretty fern. It looks really dainty, but it's very hardy. And it's perfect for a residential garden. It doesn't get too big, doesn't really take over a space. This is called ironweed. It can get quite tall. It can get up to about 6 feet tall. It loves lots of sun. At this time of year, it's just finished flowering. It has beautiful, you can see a little bit, it has beautiful purple flowers. Common yarrow is a fabulous all-around plant. It looks very pretty. It's got a great foliage. It can bake in the sun, yet it can also do very well in moist soil, so it's great for a rain garden. And this plant is Ohio goldenrod. Not to be confused with Canada goldenrod, that is also a native plant but does quite well on its own, so we don't have to sell it at our nursery. So this is not as well known, but it is a plant of wet areas, so it's perfectly adapted for a rain garden. Beautiful yellow flowers, and you don't have to worry about it spreading and taking over your garden. I love this little plant. It's called blue-eyed grass. It flowers in the spring, but still looks fabulous at this time of year. It's not a grass at all. It's actually more like an iris. But it produces little purpley blue flowers at the end of the leaves. This is how tall it gets. So it's a contrast to some of the bigger, tall plants. If you want some smaller plants for your garden, it's a great choice. This pretty plant is called Boneset. It's just covered with insects when it's flowering. This is finished flowering now, and it's seeding. So we'll be collecting seed from this plant to grow new Boneset for next spring. This is a plant that's great for rain gardens. It's found just locally around here in roadside ditches, which of course are filled with water after rainfalls. So again, it's well adapted to that kind of situation where there's tons of water and then it's dry, and then tons of water, then it's dry.
Well, this is Cardinal Flower, and it's a lobelia, and it sends up a really big stalk, and you see this on the side of the road in northern Ontario in August usually. It's also in Algonquin Park too, I've seen it. But it's a really gorgeous, striking scarlet, almost a corally scarlet color. Then we've got the great blue lobelia, which, who doesn't love that? It's gorgeous. You can work with that as a designer. You can add this into your garden, and you're doing a good thing for the environment as well as having the beauty of the plant. Now this one is really kind of nice. It'll get to be maybe about 3 feet tall, and it always has this beautiful texture to it. It has a really interesting scent to it, and it's a tall wormwood, so it's an artemisia that's native to Canada. There's lots and lots of different types of grasses, and this one here is the side oats Gamagrass. So you get a great texture with the different seed heads that are on it. But there's hundreds and hundreds of native grasses that you can use to ornamental effect. And then this one's one of my favorites. It's not blooming right now, but this is prairie smoke, or geum. And this one is what I call the Dr. Seuss plant, because when it comes up in flower, it comes up with a little hairy top, bright red, and then as it dies, it becomes kind of a silvery little waving thing. You get this to grow in a mass. It's the most awesome cloud of color first thing in the spring. And this grows on our garden plain or any of the areas where you've got limestone and then very, very little soil. So this is like a perfect plant for green roofs. But we like to plant it also in areas that are under a lot of stress with a lot of sunshine, heavy deep freezing. It takes such abuse, it's amazing.
In our next video, we'll take a look at a number of different completed rain gardens and explain how they function.